Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Digital Life, a podcast series by IEEE Signal Processing Society. Founded as IEEE's first society in 1948, the Signal Processing Society is the world's premier association for signal processing engineers and industry professionals. In this series, we've been having candid discussions about developments of various areas of signal processing, which are the underlying ubiquitous technologies for today's modern society. In this sixth episode, Lav Varshney hosts Kush Varshney to discuss the topic Trustworthy Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence. Feel welcomed.
Hi, I'm Lav Varshney, Associate Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering here at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And I'm really happy to have my brother, Kush, who's an IBM Fellow, joining us. So, Kush, do you want to just talk about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So, as you said, I am an IBM Fellow and have come to this point starting with a signal processing background and over the years have been doing a lot of machine learning and AI research. And these days I'm responsible for a lot of the innovations that IBM does in AI governance. And I lead a team of researchers working on what we call human-centered and trustworthy AI.
What is trustworthy AI? So what are some of the main concepts?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me answer it in maybe a slightly roundabout sort of way. So tell me, you have this guy, Lamar, who's a cabinet maker for you, right? So what has he made for you?
Yeah, he's made a baking rack. He's made tables and chairs from rural Illinois. And in fact, his life history is kind of interesting. The first 40 years of his life, he was Amish, and then he left the Amish, but still has the skills. But as he progressed, like learning how to drive, learning all kinds of new technologies at the age of 40 is non-trivial. So a very interesting perspective on life.
Yeah, so what made him trustworthy for you? What were some of the attributes that by which you would say that, yeah, I mean, this is a trustworthy person?
Yeah, I mean, I think the personal relationship for sure. We've developed that. We live in nearby, and from a broader similar community. But also, I think just kind of that vulnerability that we connect on some personal level. So I think that was kind of the core of the trust.
Yeah, so this is great. I mean, because that's exactly what we need from the trustworthy AI as well. So people in the research field have kind of come up with 4 attributes of what makes for a trustworthy person and also a trustworthy AI system. So one of them that you mentioned is kind of that intimacy, the ability to understand each other, go back and forth, and so forth. And a couple of others are just competence, just that the person can do what they say that they're going to do. And another one is kind of reliability, that competence sticks around in different settings, different conditions, intimacy we talked about. And then the fourth one is kind of some level of selflessness, such that that other person is working for your goals rather than only for themselves. So would you agree? I mean, is that how you see Lamar?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, just to tell a funny story that my kids will probably not appreciate. One time we went to his store and had to do a diaper change on his bench saw table. So very trusting.
Awesome. Yeah. So when we take that human relationship to AI, there's a lot of exactly the same things. So the competence is just, I mean, accuracy, just the AI system doing what it's supposed to do with high quality. The reliability kind of manifests in different ways. So it could be robustness to distribution shifts, so things that change over time in the world. It could be fairness, so that these AI systems work well for all people, all individuals, all groups, and so forth, especially kind of marginalized ones. And adversarial robustness as well. So if there's an attacker who's trying to maliciously get these things to not do what they're supposed to, is it robust to that? So that's all the reliability part. In terms of the intimacy, the communication back and forth, So the direction from the machine to the human, that's what we call kind of explainability or interpretability. So how do we as people understand what the machine, like how it's making decisions and so forth. And then there's also kind of uncertainty quantification, because you want to know what the limits are. What is the quality, I mean, up to some confidence interval or things of that nature. And then some sort of overall transparency as well, like what's going on in this entire system. And then the other direction is humans communicating to the AI as well. So can we instill our values, our goals into the system? And then the selflessness, I think, I mean, part of it is what I was just saying. I mean, kind of satisfying the human goals, societal goals, and so forth, but also just working for all people for their needs, so that they can do what they're looking for. Yeah. And do you think there's kind of fundamental tensions between these various elements of trustworthy AI? Or do you think you can have all of them? Yeah, it's an interesting question. So there are many sort of things that can be simultaneously achieved. So we had a paper a few years ago which shows that accuracy and fairness are not trade-offs if you measure actually accuracy in the right way. Because when you have like unfairness, it's usually because of bias, some sort of mismatch between what the model is being trained on and what the ideal situation should be. And so in that paper, we actually use some concepts of Chernoff information, which is very much a signal processing sort of technology used for analyzing binary detection, hypothesis testing, and so forth. And we're able to show that actually there is no trade-off if you measure accuracy in an unbiased sort of world, in a construct space where there's no bias. But people usually actually measure the unfairness on already biased stuff. So then they see or observe that there is a trade-off between fairness and accuracy, but they're actually not measuring accuracy appropriately. But there are also trade-offs sometimes. So if you're more transparent, it allows for attackers to have more information to attack you as well. So it's not always the case, but there are sort of many instances where you can have it all. Yeah, and I think that's one role that kind of theoretical thinking helps with, is understanding these kinds of things. And I wonder what your thoughts are about the practice of building trustworthy AI versus kind of theorizing and establishing their limits and properties. Should one just build the thing, or should one, think about it in advance? Yeah, I think both are important. And there's, I mean, something that Steve Jobs said many decades ago, which is that a lot of the best thinking happens as a result of doing. So you need to be doing some stuff, and that leads you to the right questions to ask, and then you can think further and theorize and so forth, and kind of approach the appropriate sort of problems. But I don't think, I mean, doing things completely in isolation, like just doing, is always the best strategy either, because like, I mean, it's a very signal processing mindset. I mean, a model-based approach, because you can kind of do things very much completely data-oriented, and you're not learning anything. You're not putting in maybe the right thought processes and so forth. So I think having a model-based sort of mindset is good, especially when you're considering all of these considerations beyond accuracy, because there's different notions of them, different ways to think about them. And so, yeah, I mean, theorizing is important, but I think it needs to be a back and forth sort of story. Yeah, it seems like you're describing kind of the problem finding aspect of research and development to be very linked to the practice of it. And then problem solving and externalizing perhaps a little bit less so. And I'm curious, with AI becoming more and more prevalent as a cognitive tool for researchers, for engineers, for others, what role will the humans continue to play, and what relationship will they have to AI as things progress?
especially in this kind of problem finding, problem solving kind of cycle.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. So, I mean, there's been this general sense of like things like digital humanities that have kind of had a role, but I think just with the last couple of years, with the large language models coming aboard, it kind of supercharges that. And the reason I bring up humanities and also maybe like social sciences in some capacity is that there's kind of this the provocation. There's this kind of sense that this in those fields, this is the problem to be studied, and that can then kind of bring things forward and work towards kind of the engineering and the science and so forth. So let me kind of give maybe a slightly unusual example, but let's think about Benjamin Franklin. He noticed, I mean, in the world that he was living in, which was the colonial America back in the 1700s, and buildings would catch on fire. They were made out of wood, and they would catch on fire. And he was very civic-minded. He was kind of
help start a country, it seems. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And he not only that, he started the first post office, the sanitation department in Philadelphia, many different things. And as he was thinking about it, what could he do to stop these fires? He actually took, like, I mean, that was the provocation. I mean, it was that he was in the world. He was kind of considering, I mean, what can I do? And he actually had two different things that he ended up doing. And I think they have an interesting contrast. So one was to establish a fire department. So in Philadelphia, the first all-volunteer fire department that would serve the entire community was his brainchild. And the second, as we kind of know as electrical engineers, is he studied the phenomenon of lightning, that it is electricity, what its nature is, and then through the scientific work, he was able to figure out that the lightning rod could be used as a preventative measure, so that houses would not get struck by lightning and then catch on fire. So, like all of these, it like goes through kind of a provocation sort of step, some sort of research in different directions, some theorizing and so forth, and then eventually to productizing, which is a good way to look at it. And I think this applies to AI these days as well. So there's some folks that I work with, and I'm encouraging them to take their expertise in the humanities and social sciences to figure out what are good ways to bring community values into LLMs.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, let's just kind of build on this electricity example. We're electrical engineers by training. But if you look at the history of it, it took maybe 50 years for electricity to really diffuse across industrial and societal sectors. On the other hand, I think the hope is that AI as a general purpose technology can move a little bit more quickly. In fact, there's a political scientist, Jeffrey Ding, who makes this argument that national strength and national competitiveness is really more about diffusion of technology than innovation in the first place. And I was wondering if you can comment, first of all, on that and AI policy in general, but then also the role of industrial research labs like IBM Research in this diffusion into the various industrial and societal sectors.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The way things have played out in the last couple of years, we've seen these very large foundation models get created in the AI space, and they are general purpose. But in some ways, that means that they have no purpose at all because they're so general that like they're not specific enough to solve the use cases that are the ones that will lead to productivity of various kinds. And so having kind of abilities for different groups, different communities etc., different organizations to make these authentic for themselves is the barrier. That is where the adoption will happen. That's where how the diffusion through society will happen. And uh, there's, I mean, this interesting sort of ecosystem that's coming up, which is uh, taking foundation models as a commodity in some sense, which it kind of has become because of open source, especially open weight models. From Meta, like the Llama series, from Mistral, from DeepSeek. So Mistral is in France, DeepSeek is in China, and then there's many others, including at IBM Research, we create the Granite family of language models as well. And the way this is progressing now is, I mean, the questions that are important are how do we get these into different industries? How do we infuse them into the practices that exist, and kind of go from there? And I think industrial research labs, especially ones that are like actually industrial, so not like a tech-only consumer-facing sort of world, but that interact with a lot of different industries, are going to be the ones that are able to kind of translate a lot of things into what is needed. And coming back to the policy question, so yeah, maybe let me push it back to you also. I mean, you were a White House Fellow a couple of years ago, and wrote a lot of AI policy for the U.S. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of questions around kind of innovation and how to drive AI progress. So there's certainly those concerns. And there's a need for resources all the way from basic research all the way to deployment across industries. And then I think another area that's of particular interest to me on the policy side is with respect to critical infrastructure. As we make water systems and electric grids and transportation systems smart with AI infusion, we also want to make sure that they're secure. Because on the one hand, it improves efficiency and quality of services, but on the other, it creates new attack surfaces. And so trying to balance those as we push AI into infrastructure, I think is a key kind of policy question. And likewise, kind of this question around trust more generally, I think is important for diffusion. And so there's different ways of doing this. The Biden era executive order on AI had a very small section on professional engineers in government getting AI training. And I think that is especially important for kind of doing this at the state level and so on. So kind of ensuring that the people who are building technologies outside of AI but are using AI as components are well trained for the safety. And I mean, I think at some points you've talked to me about how IBM is kind of like a security blanket for other large companies. And maybe like there's some kind of governance and policy aspects to that as well, which maybe you could speak to.
Yeah, so there's this phrase like no one ever got fired for choosing IBM, and that's the security blanket sort of idea. And yeah, we've been creating a lot of technologies for different enterprises to govern their AI. So I've contributed a lot of the thinking behind an IBM product called Watson-X.Governance, and it begins with kind of elicitation of what are the risks that are important for a given industry, a given use case, and I'm trying to be clear on that. So some of my colleagues here have developed something called the Usage Governance Advisor, and that is actually another LLM. It's an AI system that is going to chat with you, kind of elicit in a natural sort of dialogue sense that what is your use case, and give suggestions of risks, and what are the important things to control for and cover and so forth. And this comes back to what you were saying before, like how can AI itself be useful in understanding the problems, right? So that's one piece of it, and it is also connected to a lot of policy sort of documents as well, so regulations and things that are coming up very quickly. And then once you have that, let's say there is a sense that this use case needs to worry about these sort of harms, then we also have been creating a detector, so a classification model to be able to detect different harms and risks in prompts going into LLMs and the responses coming out of them. And we've open sourced that. It's something called the Granite Guardian model. So it's available on Hugging Face. And basically, the idea is there's a bunch of different dimensions, different social biases, violence, unethical behavior, profanity, et cetera, a lot of things of that nature, as well as kind of catching jailbreaking attempts. So this is when a user is maliciously trying to get the model to do what it's not supposed to do. And we also detect different hallucination sort of things. So this is when a model is creating things that are kind of not exactly true. It's confabulating some combination of things and creating something that's untrue. So we have detection for all of that, and I think that's a big part of it. And then once you can detect, you can kind of feed things back. I also do a bunch of kind of safety training for our main branded models, the language models, not the guardians.
Yeah. And do you think of these as trustworthy AI or AI ethics, governance, AI safety, responsible AI? How are all these things kind of related to one another? Because it's kind of almost a zoo of ideas. And just curious, you've written a book on this topic and so on. So how do you think about all these things?
Yeah, so I think of responsible AI kind of as the umbrella topic under which some of these other things live. So trustworthy AI is those four attributes that we were talking about at the beginning. So it's kind of the operationalization of things, whereas AI ethics is kind of like what is right and wrong, good and bad, desired and undesired sort of behavior. So thinking through the principles. So that's the AI ethics. The trustworthy AI is kind of operationalizing those specifically. That how do I achieve those sort of ethical methods? And over the years, we've created several open source toolkits in these spaces for fairness, explainability, robustness, uncertainty quantification, and so forth. And then safety, in my mind, is actually the first two out of those four attributes. So it's the accuracy, the basic performance, and then the second was the reliability, including in the face of adversaries. And the way I kind of very quick describe, safety in a very short way is everything that you need to do to minimize the expected harms and also the unexpected ones. So expected is more probability theory, right? So how do you minimize the expected value, the risk, and so forth? And then the unexpected harms, this is more possibility theory. So this is kind of other ways of looking at uncertainty. So those first two attributes are really the safety aspects, and then the interactions and the goals and so forth become the broader trustworthy AI. And then AI governance is then the kind of the operational aspect. So once you have the principles and then the practices, the operationalization, then what are the processes that you put in place to make sure that that happens in an actual deployment?
And do you have any sense of what these possibilities, these unknown unknowns in terms of risk could be? Especially like when we're thinking about a lot of kids are starting to use AI, and there's often this question around mental health with social media, and perhaps we have a second bite at the apple with respect to generative AI and other AI technologies. And I think we've both thought about this from a personal perspective. Your son and daughter and my daughter are the same age, and my son is not so much younger. We've been thinking about this personally, but then also kind of societally. What do you think about these risks going forward?
Yeah, I think specifically the unknown unknowns, the epistemic uncertainty and so forth is it's an interesting question. I mean, if we knew they wouldn't be unknown unknowns. But in some capacity, On the human level, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is that our own human agency is at risk, because when these AI systems are getting more and more agency, the more and more autonomy to do things, I mean, they might end up being the ones that dictate what humans end up doing, and that isn't good for human flourishing, human well-being, for kids or adults. And so, like, how to balance and how to distribute agency among humans and machines is going to be, I think, a critical sort of question, because uh, like like a lot of people talk about job loss and this sort of stuff as a big concern from increasing automation, but to me, it's actually even worse if you have a job, but your job is to do everything that an AI tells you. And so there's alternatives that one can consider, kind of more uh, other forms of collaboration. An AI system doesn't just have to be an assistant with just like this one box that you type into. There's many other kinds of interaction patterns that one can imagine, other roles that an AI can take as a critic, as a negotiator, as many other things. And so I think that's a space we need to keep exploring and making progress on for ourselves, for our kids, and their kids. So I think that's definitely one. Another sort of thing that a lot of people talk about is very much the dystopian sort of vision of the loss of control over these AI systems, and how that might completely kind of have an existential issue with humanity. And so I think that's another sort of thing. I think it's something I'm less concerned about right now, because I think just humanity right now, I mean, there's so many clear and present sort of risks that we need to worry about and take care of, but that is another thing that does come up.
Yeah, and Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist and I guess Nobel laureate in economics, he was thinking about AI at the end and was asking questions around whether humans should go first and then AI second in decision making, or the opposite. And in fact, in a paper that we published in the IEEE Transactions on Signal Processing, we argued that in certain settings, you actually want the AI to go last to make the final decision, even though from a kind of liability and responsibility perspective, maybe you would want the human to go last. And so, yeah, I'm very much on board with thinking about these kind of alternative structures of human and AI interaction. And it seems to me that kind of theory of mind capability, like understanding what is going on, at least phenomenologically, with AIs, like helps humans quite a bit. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Just like in terms of different relationships, different architectures, one example I like to give is there used to be a TV show, House MD. So Dr. House had these residents who would help him in diagnosing difficult diseases, and he would always challenge them. I mean, like, they were very adversarial against him, and this was like he maintained full agency. They might not have had so much, but the main point is, if the human is at the top and these other sort of agents, they could be AI, then I mean, that sort of relationship might be an architecture that works. And yeah, to the point of theory of mind, I think that's a really great point. So yeah, I mean, both of us have started thinking about this in various ways. So one experiment that one of our interns did recently is so there are kind of two different types of information processing styles, or problem-solving styles, that people have: selective versus comprehensive. And so a in one case, some people like to see all the details first and then the big picture, and other people like to see the big picture first and then all the details. So in that sort of setting, if the AI is providing an explanation, what we were able to show is, if you're better matched to the human's needs, which is a form of theory of mind, then that relationship is more productive. And another example of this, different intern, so she was looking at the question of introductions. So often when humans meet for the first time, they need to introduce themselves to each other. We didn't have to do that in this video, but it really helps. I mean, because then you get a sense of what the other person is thinking and so forth. And from there, then that relationship actually is better. So what she was able to show is in kind of a game setting that uh, if there's an introduction period before an AI and a human start playing the particular game, then they actually do better. So there's a bunch of things that I think are coming up, and this is more at like kind of like a behavior level, but I think there's going to be things that come up further down the stack as well. So are there language models that can share particular information from inside the models that are useful for that knowledge as well?
So it seems like you're saying that context matters a lot, and establishing that between the humans and the machines is important. Can you also speak about context more generally, like coming back to AI ethics? Like in terms of, you were saying, figuring out what's right and wrong. How does one even do that in the first place?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I think part of the thing we have to, I mean, understand is that yes, there is no, universality or absolutism in right and wrong. This in some ethical sort of practices, some sort of in certain moral philosophies, there is a universalism that's kind of brought forth. So if I believe in this, that means I cannot believe in this other thing. But there's many other kinds of relational ethics and other sort of philosophies that really emphasize the point that things are more specific. So your duty is your duty, and it's influenced by your relationships, by your skills, by your expertise, by your occupation, by your, in many different things. And so, in those settings, there is a very specific notion. It is a contextual sort of obligation that you would have, and what is right and what is wrong does depend on it. So, if we start with that assumption, then the question becomes: how do we align a model? How do we get an LLM or some other AI system to be appropriate for meeting my needs, for having my sense of right and wrong, right? So one more thing I'll say before kind of coming to more of the technical aspects is there's also different scopes of this sort of alignment, because it might be like this mutual theory of mind. You might want a very personal sort of alignment, so just for me, but you can also want it for small groups, for larger organizations or countries or societies or the whole world. And kind of getting the right scope is also important, because a lot of what I see in the AI alignment literature is really the big, like, aligning for the whole world sort of situation and for all time. Whereas, I mean, having a more context-dependent, context-bounded sort of alignment is maybe a little bit less studied. So, in terms of how to do this, there are methods. I mean, so once you have a pre-trained model, you want to fine-tune it. You want to kind of teach it. These senses. So that could be done in a supervised manner. So giving examples of what is right and what is wrong, or it could be done through a reward model, so that you're kind of noting that every time something that is preferred gets rewarded and so forth. And a big part of that is creating the data. So it could be through human sort of annotations, but these days synthetic data generation is becoming a big thing for getting models to do what we want them to do. So so we can think of it as like with a teacher model and a student model. So the teacher generates data that's of the form that we are wanting to illustrate examples of the right and the wrong, and trying to do that at scale is its own issue. So how do you prompt a model to produce those kind of outputs? But once you have them, then you can go through and do fine tuning.
Right. And do you worry much about intellectual property with respect to data? Because you're describing a need for data in LLM training and in AI quite broadly, but now also very specifically.
Yeah, it is a concern. There are, many notions of fair use, or what is allowable or not allowable. It has its own, ethics as well. I think it's important to be respectful of uh, different professions that are content creators, especially, and kind of do things in the right way as much as possible. And uh, doesn't mean just following the law. So one of my colleagues uses this phrase that lawful can be awful. So it doesn't have to be just like there is some copyright law and just stick to that, but think more broadly. Who's being harmed? In what way are they being harmed? And then what can we do to
Yeah, so I think it's good to respect the so-called moral rights or the droid rights of creators in addition to just the legal ones. Yeah, with respect to kind of this universality discussion, so you were arguing that AI systems should be contextual. On the other hand, kind of the epistemic foundations of signal processing are very much about universality, this mathematical abstraction. And I was wondering how you square those things, and then also just how has signal processing kind of entered your thinking as you've developed Trustworthy AI?
Yeah, it's a very good sort of question. So, there are fundamentals that in signal processing that we do treat as uh, as universal in some capacities. So, actually, just last week, we had a IEEE milestone dedication here at IBM Research, where I'm sitting right now, for the FFT, the Cooley-Tukey algorithm, which was first demonstrated here. So, that is an example of, Fourier analysis is signal processing. In many ways, and the fact is that there is representations that are done so that we can look at things in different ways. But it wasn't always. That was the starting point. But then there have been things beyond that. For example, like a short time Fourier transform, right? So that is exactly what I'm saying, right? So you could look at alignment universally for all time. So frequency implies infinite time. But if you're doing kind of a short time Fourier transform, you are kind of more in an episodic sort of sense. And I've actually recently been having fun with this bird call identification app from the Cornell Ornithology Lab, and they're very much doing a short time Fourier transform because you need to look at frequencies in context, in time, and so forth. So all of that is just making the point that the right scope is important. So that's kind of like one way to think about this. And coming to your other point of like how signal processing in general influence some of how I work on Trustworthy AI. So let me, give a few examples. One of them is sparse signal representation is a big field, and it comes up in compressed sensing, especially, and in many other sort of areas. So maybe about a decade ago, this was one of the first papers in interpretable machine learning, and we used techniques from actually what's called Boolean compressed sensing to be able to learn interpretable and sparse classification rules from training data that would generalize. And this was quite unique, and I think has made a difference in how things happen. So the same technique was used by some of my colleagues in this explainable AI challenge that FICO put out. So FICO is the credit scoring company in the US, and and many other places, and they wanted people to develop kind of interpretable methods for credit sort of scoring systems, and my colleagues applied this kind of method and actually won that competition. And their decision rule was just kind of like 2 or 3 clauses. And so, I mean, this is one example.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And yeah, just like you were saying, harmonic analysis can be extended in various ways to be interpretable. So it's something I've been working on for some years. Information modest learning has some of those same properties too. Any other SP ideas you want to tell the audience about?
Sure. So another example, something that we're working on. So there's this very old representation called continued fractions. So some of our listeners might be aware. So there's a numerator and then a denominator, and within the denominator, there's another fraction that's added on, and then within the denominator of that, there's another fraction, and so forth. So this can be used for IIR filters. I mean, a lot of different things, but the way we've been using it is as a kind of neural network, different than anything else that is out there, and it has all those same like interpretability benefits, many fewer parameters than these big models, and more robust in certain ways, and so forth. And just recently, my team members have kind of come up with the generative version of it, so they can actually do all the things that ChatGPT does using these continued fraction networks, Coffer nets inside. So that's another great example of signal processing type work.
Awesome. So what are the big new things that you're thinking about these days?
Yeah, I think my mind is going much more towards kind of the moral philosophy, moral psychology side of things. So one thing in a lot of kind of different use cases that we see, people kind of get the impression that if they just start using ChatGPT, it'll be like fully useful for them, that there's no shortcomings or no gaps and so forth. But when you dig in a little bit, there's often a little bit of misalignment. There's some knowledge that's too general or that's missed. There might be kind of certain values that aren't met and so forth. So, so one thing that we're trying to do is kind of again take more of a humanities, social science sort of perspective to determine what are the probes to go into figuring out what are the shortcomings for a given AI system. This isn't exactly easy because historians and political theorists and critical data theorists and folks of that sort are used to taking many months or years working on a paper and kind of having some unique insight. But if you want to kind of take an ethnographic sort of approach, figure out what a community's needs are, and create probes that can automatically red team a model to figure out where its shortcomings are, needs to be shortened, and it's a different mindset. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a big thing that I'm kind of thinking about. And yeah, in general, just like what are like more authentic ways for AI to be useful for people in society.
Awesome. So I think we're getting close to the end. I think maybe if you want to say anything to close, or maybe you can just talk about some examples of AI having strong societal impact.
No, I mean, we don't have a lot of time, so maybe I'll just be brief on some AI for social good thinking, and it actually connects back to what we were talking about earlier with different kinds of approaches, like the fire department versus the lightning rod. There's many ways to make social impact, I think. Some things are more operational. So we've done projects to improve the efficiency of homeless street outreach, or gleaning food from farms that would have been destroyed otherwise to feed the hungry. I mean, there's many operational sort of things that you can use AI for social good for, but then there's also kind of the more scientific sort of things. So on the creativity side, for example, So I know, I mean, you started Chef Watson and have done a lot since then on computational creativity and so forth on music and many other areas. But you can also do it for molecular generation for new vaccines, therapeutics, vaccine stabilizers, et cetera, et cetera. So different ways to use AI and data science and signal processing for social good. Awesome. So I know you're a popular podcaster on the Mixture of Experts, IBM's podcast. And I think the single expert is also really, really awesome, Kush. So thank you for taking the time. And it was really fun. Yeah, thanks for doing this with me, Lav. I couldn't have imagined a better person to do this with. So thank you.
And there you have it, listeners. Thank you so much for listening to this 6th episode of our Digital Life podcast series. A big thank you to everyone that made this episode possible, starting from the production team led by Cactus, Michelle and Bill from IEEE staff, Marcelo, who's the Outreach and Visibility Committee chair. In closing, we welcome you to other episodes on all leading podcast platforms such as Apple, Amazon, and Spotify. We further welcome you to watch the video version of this podcast on YouTube and on the IEEE Signal Processing website. Until next time, keep learning and innovating. Bye-bye.